up, guys? I am a product of Hayward. I went to Hayward High. My whole process of my academic career is a long one, and it's still ongoing. So first, I was always interested in science. I was the one in my neighborhood turning over rocks, collecting all the little roly-polies, putting them in jars, and trying to make a roly-poly farm versus an ant farm. My mom bought me a microscope because that's the only thing I asked for when I was about 7 years old. So I have a microscope at home, lead to say I'm a microbiologist. So yes, I started at Hayward. I was a student athlete. Grades, that's like high school. Don't know really how to study. You're kind of just there just because you're supposed to be there, right? So from high school, I ended up getting a scholarship to UC Dominguez Hills, or no, CSU Dominguez Hills, where it was for basketball. So we're going through that process of the whole California and budget cuts. So ended up, my scholarship got cut. So my whole life I worked towards this goal, and it just demolished between in an instant. So then I went to CSU East Bay, and I went to school there. I was in the health science field because I told myself, you're not smart enough to do a biology degree. And I believed it. I believed it until 2 years, and I tried to walk onto the basketball team, and again, they told me I was too skinny and I wasn't vocal enough. So from there, I'm getting doors shut left and right in my face, so I came back to Chabot. I did concurrent enrollment at East Bay for my third year, and I came to Chabot. So I took 27 units, played on the basketball team, worked because obviously my family didn't really have it. From Chabot, I ended up getting a scholarship, another basketball scholarship. And I was headed D1, which is usually like the teams you see on TV, SEC, Louisiana. I was planning on going to Louisiana. And I dislocated my ankle my senior year at Chabot. It still hurts. You know, I always wonder what would happen if I didn't take that layup to this day. But I guess it all worked out because I still ended up getting a scholarship. I went D2, and that's when they told me they no longer had the health science program. So I had, 2 scholarships taken away from me, dislocated my ankle, and I was still continuing. Had 3 years of school done, and now I have to start all over at zero pretty much because they no longer had my major. So that's when I had to take the big step, and I was like, you know what? I just have to do biology because there's nothing else possible that interests me. I don't really like numbers. I got my first D at East Bay because I took macroeconomics as an elective. That was out. Plus, that was my sister's specialty, and I always wanted to create my own path. What else? I don't like reading, let's be honest. Who really likes reading like that? So I knew English wasn't for me. And so I was just I just have to swallow the bullet and do BS in biology. So I did 3 years at Stanislaus State, and I was on the basketball team. You guys aren't gonna believe this. My senior year, after my first season playing, I ended up getting really sick. I was hospitalized. I had a rare condition called Lundgren's angina, which led to me having a tumor in my jaw. I was cut from that basketball program. So with that, fun fact, I only have 22 teeth because I had to remove my teeth. That was yet another setback. So I continued. I had to retake a whole year of classes because I was drugged and I couldn't study. A lot of the teachers, they didn't give me any sympathy. And I actually got a D in microbiology. You're allowed 1 D, not proud of it, but hey, I got through, got my BS degree. And it's kind of funny that I got a D in microbiology because now I'm a microbiologist. So with all my setbacks, I just want to say, just keep going. If you guys have that passion, you guys want to put that work in, just keep doing it. Because eventually it will pay off. And it hasn't paid off quite yet, but I'm working there. So from college, my first job as a microbiologist, it was food micro. And that was when I pretty much basic aseptic techniques. You'll get food samples in the lab. So for example, let's say nuts. So we would get nuts, I'd weigh them out, I'll do the certain tests. So we tested for E. coli, O157, which is another form of E. coli, through PCR technique. Everyone's familiar with PCR yet? Yes? No? No? Okay, so PCR is an amplification of the DNA. So essentially you take your nuts and you would put it in a special media. All labs have different media. Let's just say we're testing for Listeria mono, which is a bacteria, foodborne bacteria. And you would incubate it, you get it out the incubator, and then you have your gel electrophoresis. And then you pretty much just pipette into the buffer. You run it through a cycle machine about 2 times, depending on what it is. You put it on the gel, and then you read the gel. It's kind of almost similar to an X-ray, but you're just reading the ladders versus the lines, and how far it amplificates, is that a word? But how far it amplifies is how you know if it's a positive or negative. You'll get there, don't worry. So that was food. I did that for a year, and in my family, they always weren't supportive, I guess you could say. It was like no matter what I did, it was never good enough for my family. So I'm very hard on myself. Very hard, if I could tell you the stories. So after a year, I eventually moved back home, and now I work at an environmental microbiology lab. There we do specialized spore traps, and I can analyze about 120 different spores. And we do maybe about 75 samples a day, so I'm pretty trained with the microscope. We also test for Legionella. That was a different kind of bacteria that's usually in the big water towers, and it can be airborne within the hospitals. That's all I'm really doing right now, but I'm also back at Chabot taking classes because I'm just not where I want to be right now, especially with this economy, trying to get out from under mommy and daddy. That's just me. I'm 26. I feel like it's time. But if I was to tell you guys anything, it would just be have patience. It's very hard to have patience. I still struggle with this patience process and trusting the process, but I think it's very essential because in your 20s, you're kind of just grinding. It's just a constant grind. And then so it'll pay off in your 30s or 40s. You never know. But eventually, like whatever you're working towards, you will achieve it because it's really all in your mind. Like I told myself, I can't. And that's the biggest fall you can ever do. The biggest fall. And I'm thinking about it like right now, it's like, I told myself I can't be a doctor. People told me like, oh, you should be a doctor. You seem like you could be a doctor. And I'm just like, yeah, but don't butt yourself. And there's gonna be people against you, even my own family. They won't know what you're doing or why you're doing it. It's all within you. So you have to trust yourself. Because once you trust yourself, everything else will follow. That's all I have. Any questions? Did you have questions? You said you wanted to be...
Well, I'm just taking biology for the first time next semester, and I didn't know, like, as a first-time student, what should I expect, or how should I go in prepared?
Have you taken it before, like ever? High school? Or it's been a while? No? Okay. There's different ways. I'm the kind of person where I like colors. The colors attract my eyes. So I use a lot of pens and highlighters. And I was taught Cornell notes in high school, but for me that just was not a process for me. But it will take a lot of studying and memorization. And I think that's why I liked biology, because memorizing is kind of fun to me. It's like a game. So just definitely like study. And if you can, like, what's it, KHAN Academy on YouTube? Khan? Yeah. That was like my best friend with everything.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Did you have questions? No?
Yeah, I plan to take microbiology again now for semester. So do you have any good suggestion for studying microbiology?
I think it depends on your teacher. I feel like Not to say it's just the teacher's fault, but I'm actually taking microbiology here, and I have, I think his name starts with a C, like Catalone, what was it? Yes, I have him, and I think he's actually very fair, and it's very straightforward. He gives you a study guide for the test. If you do the study guide, if you study the study guide, you'll do fine. And another thing I want to add, I am not an A student. I'm sometimes a B and C. If you want to do the nursing route, of course you need the A's and B's. But if you want to do the research side, not saying to settle for the C's, but I'm pretty much a C student. And I'm still here with the title. So don't get caught up thinking like you need the A's and B's. It looks good, but again, like I graduated because of my sickness. I could only get my GPA up to maybe like a 2.8. I still got into a UC for grad school. No, I didn't go for other reasons, but it's just a number. Don't be too worried about it. Yeah.
It sounds like from your story, you've been able to persist through a lot of adversity in your life. I'm just wondering too, if you can talk a little bit more about your perspective as a woman in STEM, you know, how that experience was for you, and then also what has allowed you to persist in the face of that adversity as well, that there aren't a lot of women in STEM.
Yeah, there's not. I am, and I've always been through my 2 jobs I have, the only black lady in my lab. So, yay for that. My current job position, there are only 2 people of color. 2. Does that really matter? Yes and no. Because sometimes you will say things and then they kind of like don't believe you in a way. So it's like you have to stay firm and you have to know what you're talking about. And then if they just continue to overtalk you or act as if you don't know what you're talking about, you gotta put your foot down. You gotta kind of not say like get ratchet or get ghetto, but there's times where I'm just like, excuse me, I have the floor, thanks. And then go ahead and proceed with what you say. I personally have had a professor that I had a problem with, but again, it's all about how you handle things. If you come proper and you know your facts, you can never argue facts. And that's what I learned. If you know what you're talking about, what can they argue? They can't shame you, they can't dumb you down any more than what you think they can, if that makes sense. So. Anyone else?
I did.
Yeah.
You said you did confirm enrollment. Did you do it from high school to college or college to college?
College to college.
Okay, because I thought it was only for like high school students to do community college.
Nope, I did both. Yeah, and I also did it in high school. My high school had a class. I just took like psychology. But yeah, if you want to, go for it. Yes.
So you spoke a lot about, or you shared a lot of your story, and again, I'm gonna touch on what Bobby's talking about, like your adversity that you've gone through, like, but I'm gonna take another direction. What did you personally use to get through that? Because other people might quit, right? Or other people might get to a point, or maybe you even got to a point where it was like, F all this, like this is way too much, why am I doing this, right? And whether that's you or whether it's other people, what have you, how did you get through? How do you keep getting through?
I think it's mostly having thick skin and knowing because whatever I do is never good enough for my family and I seek their approval to a certain, like, to an extent that's kind of to an impossible level. I definitely, like, I would say I have thick skin. You can't really tell me anything, and if I'm wrong, I'll say I'm wrong, but chances are I'm not wrong. So, yeah, that's a tough question. I feel like it was kind of just like life happenings as far as like my setbacks. It was nothing I could really control. It was out of my control.
So you're saying you worry about the things you could control and the things you couldn't, you didn't?
Yeah, because if you worry about the things that you can't control, you add a lot more stress to your plate. And being in science, you're going to be stressed enough. You will be stressed. You will cry. There's my organic chemistry book that is torn. I've tore pages out of that book because you just get so frustrated. But I'm not trying to discourage you. Just know that it can happen and that you just have to work through it. If you have the programs at your schools and your universities, use it. STEM, I don't even think this was existent when I went here. Tutoring centers, use them, because a lot of the times they're the students who got the A's and B's, and they're just giving back something similar to what I'm doing now, you know. I'll ask you guys a question. So for you, what's your name? Yeah.
Dan.
Okay. What would you, one thing that you took from everything that I said today?
About don't give up in your dream. Just fight for it, and then eventually you will achieve what you've been dreaming about.
Essentially, yes. Yep. Of course, everyone's story will be different. You guys may just fly through chemistry or your organic chemistry, whereas other people have the struggle.
I think it's funny that you said that you got a low grade in microbiology and worked in it, because I had a low grade in chemistry and taught it.
Yeah,
Things work out after some time.
they do. Definitely.
Well, everyone, Nailah's going to be here for a bit, so if you would like to ask her questions personally, you can come up to her and introduce yourselves. I would encourage you to do so. I want to thank you for coming and for being a part of today. If we could thank her together, it'd be great.